believe that this is an important step in the right direction. We believe that it is a byproduct of the U.S. government and this administration's efforts in the region.
That is the Biden administration's reaction as Israel agrees to daily pauses in its attacks on Gaza. Good evening. I'm Jake Ward in for Gadi, Schwartz. It is a brief respite for the thousands of Palestinians caught in the crossfire of Israel's war with Hamas. The U.S. says Gazans in the north will get a daily 4-hour break to make evacuation plans, but the area where that pause will happen will only be announced 3 hours ahead of time. But Israeli officials are insistent this is not a ceasefire. That fighting will continue. Meanwhile, caravans of Palestinians are leaving their homes behind in the north for the promise of safety in the south. The UN says roughly 50,000 people were evacuated through a humanitarian corridor yesterday. The U.S. says a second route will open as well. And violence continues in the West Bank. Israel says it conducted counter-terrorist raids in the city of Jenin and a nearby refugee camp. At least 18 people were killed, including one 15-year-old boy, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry.
During the raid before the last one, they raided us as well and brought in dogs. It was overwhelming and scary for the children. My children started becoming afraid, so we tried to leave and go out of the house. We went to the hospital.
NBC's Hala Garani joins us now from Tel Aviv. Okay, Hala, break down for us what exactly is this pause? How will it work?
Well, we know what the White House has said, that there will be a daily 4-hour humanitarian pause to allow for aid to get in, to allow for people to leave the north. There's been this mass exodus to the south, tens of thousands of people. This is not, though, interestingly, something that was announced first by the Israeli military or the Israeli government, but it appears as though this is perhaps an attempt by President Biden to put pressure on the Israeli government to go ahead with this plan. There was, in one of his answers to questions thrown at him today, some notion there on his part that perhaps the Israeli government was not moving as fast as the U.S. government would like in terms of allowing for these humanitarian pauses. And this is all happening, as I mentioned, as this mass exodus of people is continuing through humanitarian corridors that are not always safe, that according to some people on the ground are still very dangerous to navigate, especially around hospital areas. We saw people dragging elderly women in chairs without wheels. We saw people holding up flags. We even, interestingly, Jake, saw an IDF soldier yelling out in Hebrew in an attempt perhaps to see if some of the hostages were being moved alongside the civilians that were fleeing the danger in the northern part of the Gaza territory. But as far as the details of what this means, whether during this 3-hour heads up that people will get, whether that will also include the humanitarian pause period, probably not, because it would essentially mean a 7-hour pause. But it looks like the 4-hour pause is what we have to sort of expect, but we'll be keeping an eye because we haven't received official confirmation from the Israeli side.
And Hala, I'm trying to imagine what exactly the Israelis expect to be able to accomplish aid-wise in 4 hours and where a Gazan family might be able to go in that amount of time. I mean, this is not a region that's known to be easy to traverse, even in the best of times. You're on the ground there. I mean, is that enough time for people to safely exit northern Gaza or get anywhere to safety?
The short answer is no, because some people don't have fuel for their cars. They're traveling on donkeys. They're traveling on foot. They are sleeping where they can. There is a massive, massive humanitarian issue concerning the spread of disease because there is a lack of water. People are drinking dirty water. They do not have access to hospitals for even their most basic needs. And when you ask about whether or not the Israelis will have time to bring aid in, it's not the Israelis bringing aid in. This is aid coming in from Rafah in the southern part of the Strip from Egypt. So the Israelis are simply potentially allowing for this humanitarian pause to take place for this mass exodus of people to happen. And Jake, one thing I should note is that Palestinians are very nervous about this mass displacement of people because historically they have said time and again, we've interviewed many of them since we've been here for several weeks now, they have said historically when Palestinians are forced forced to leave somewhere, they very rarely are allowed back. And there is concern that Israel, after those pronouncements from Benjamin Netanyahu, will establish some sort of security control over the Gaza Strip. Will they be able to return to their homes is a big open question.
Yeah, and Hala, finally tonight, what can you tell us about this increase in fighting in the West Bank?
Well, that, again, is a massive worry here, Jake, because the West Bank, from the second day, from the day after the October 7th attack, the simmering tensions were getting worse and worse. We've seen increased settler violence against West Bank Palestinians. And today we saw a raid conducted by the Israeli military in the Jenin refugee camp, which is in the West Bank, that other Palestinian territory, where, as you mentioned in the intro, 18 people were killed. The Israeli military says it is targeting militant threats, but Palestinians are saying civilians once again are getting hit and are getting trapped in the crossfire. Jake.
Hala Garani for us in Tel Aviv, night after night. Hala, thank you so much. And just a few hours ago, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group released a new video showing two hostages, a young boy and elderly woman. The group said they would release the pair, citing medical and humanitarian reasons if their conditions were met. The video comes as CIA Director William Burns sat down with the head of Israel's spy agency along with Qatari officials in Doha today to talk about a deal to release some hostages. Now, over 240 hostages were taken by Hamas fighters on October 7th. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin spoke to the father of an 8-year-old girl who is believed to be among those hostages. Take a look.
She was happy, bubbly, fun child. She was a bundle of energy. It was exhausting sometimes. I'm praying for today to be exhausted again.
On October 6th, 8-year-old Emily Hand asked her father Thomas if she could stay over at a friend's house on the other side of Kibbutz Be'eri.
I said, yeah, no problem. I had an evening to myself.
The next morning, Hamas militants stormed the kibbutz, setting fire to homes and killing and kidnapping residents.
You could hear gunfire getting closer and spreading out. It was all over the place.
Thomas, a single father and Irish citizen that has lived in Israel for decades, sheltered in his safe room, unable to contact Emily. Hours later, he was rescued by the Israeli military, but there was no sign of his little girl.
They said, we've found Emily. She's been found on the kibbutz, and she's been found dead.
What went through your mind?
At the time, it was sort of a relief. It's all over for her, as heavy and hard as it was to accept. It's a little bit lighter than thinking that she's been dragged away to Gaza as a hostage.
But that was a mistake. Weeks later, Thomas says he was told by the Israeli military that actually they'd found no sign of her body. They believed Emily had been taken to Gaza along with her friend and her friend's mother. 3 of the 239 hostages held in Gaza, according to the IDF, 30 of them children. Ireland's foreign minister also telling Irish media there's a strong likelihood Emily was abducted. For weeks, a potential hostage release has been the focus of negotiations between Israel, the United States, and Qatar, with 4 hostages already freed. But Israeli officials are denying reports they're close to a deal, and the families say they have no idea if their loved ones are alive or dead.
Has there been any proof of life?
No. I've asked the Red Cross for proof of life.
But you feel that she's alive?
The evidence that I've got is enough to tell me that she is alive now.
What do you want to say to Emily?
We love you. We're waiting for you. We want you to come home soon. Hopefully you'll be here for your birthday. Be strong. We know you're strong.
Aaron McLaughlin with a tough report. Thank you so much. We are following breaking news in Long Beach, California, where a bus has crashed into a restaurant. Chopper video you can see there shows the extent of the crash. You can see the bus is wedged right into the building. It appears a number of people are hurt. We're working to confirm just how many that might be. Police have the area closed off as they begin to assess exactly what happened, and we will bring you updates on this as we get them. Now, as we get closer to the 2024 elections here in the U.S., the safety of election offices and election workers is once again in question. The FBI is now investigating a series of suspicious letters sent to election workers across various states in recent days. The letters contained an unknown powder, and in at least 2 cases, the powder tested positive for fentanyl. Officials in Georgia, Oregon, Washington, and Texas have all reported these letters. NBC's Ken Delaney has more.
That's right. Law enforcement officials tell NBC News the FBI and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service are investigating a series of letters containing suspicious powder that were sent to election workers and offices in multiple states in recent days. And in at least 2 cases, the powder tested positive in a field test for fentanyl. Officials say it's now being lab tested. There have been no reports, though, of anyone suffering ill health effects, the officials added. Officials in Georgia, Oregon, Washington State, Texas, and now California have all reported suspicious letters that have been sent to election officers or workers. The FBI in a statement tonight said it could not comment on the probe, but urged people to exercise care in handling mail, especially from unrecognized senders. The Texas Department of Public Safety said it had responded to a report of a letter containing an unknown substance that had been mailed to the state attorney general's office in Austin Thursday morning. It said in the statement that preliminary tests on the envelope had come back negative, but that the FBI would do further testing. Law enforcement officials said it's too soon to say where the letters came from or who may be responsible, but election officials are portraying this as domestic terrorism. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, for example, referred to the envelopes sent to Fulton County as terrorism and said in a statement that his office is working with our state and federal partners to determine if any additional Georgia officials are being targeted. And Washington Secretary of State Steve Hobbs told the Associated Press that the incidents in his state were acts of terrorism to threaten our elections. And of course, these letters are coming at a time when election workers have been the subject of heightened threats and harassment in the wake of baseless claims by former President Trump that the last election was marred by fraud. Back to you.
Ken Delaney in Forest. Ken, thank you. It was the longest movie and television strike in the union's history, and now, after 118 days, it may finally be over. The SAG-AFTRA union finally struck a tentative deal with the big studios and streamers, clearing the way for some 160,000 actors and performers to get back to work. But union members still need to approve the deal first. NBC's Chloe Melas has the story.
This morning, Hollywood actors can finally get back to work after an unprecedented 118 days on the picket lines. The Actors Union announcing late Wednesday that it approved a tentative agreement with the AMPTP, which represents studios and streamers, including NBC News' parent company, Comcast. Actors at a movie premiere Wednesday night were thrilled.
The strike is over.
That's amazing.
You're joking. I'm not.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that now. Let's go.
Yeah. Other actors taking to social media to share their excitement, including Octavia Spencer, who posted, "Who else is dancing right now?" And actor Kate Walsh, who wrote, "I am in teary awe of my fellow actors and sister unions who fought with all they had."
It is a very big deal, and we are very excited about it. The valuation of this deal comes in at a little bit more than $1 billion over the term of the agreement.
The AMPTP says that this deal represents a new paradigm, including the largest increase in minimum wages in 40 years, a new residual compensation structure for streaming programs, and extensive consent and compensation protections in the use of artificial intelligence. This announcement comes after months of meetings between the union and studios. Fran Drescher, the president of SAG-AFTRA, reflecting on the tense negotiations in an interview with NBC News last month.
It's being driven by people, and people that are driven by greed.
The fallout from the longest actors' strike in history has been far-reaching. The work stoppage not only hurting actors, but industries like transportation and craft services. The halt in productions has cost California's economy billions of dollars. After more than 13 weeks, the Hollywood ending so many have been hoping for.
NBC's Chloe Melas, thank you. Don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, the man accused of attacking Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul, went on trial today. We're learning more about what happened that night. Plus, killer whales are at it again. A pod of orcas just sank a yacht in the Strait of Gibraltar. And a medical breakthrough. Doctors just completed the world's first eye transplant. Dr. Sayal is here to explain. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. President Biden showed his support for unions, speaking at a United Auto Workers event in Illinois today for the reopening of a Stellantis plant. This comes after weeks of strikes, an appearance by the president on the line, and now tentative deals reached between the UAW and General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin announced today he will not be running for re-election next year. He said he has accomplished what he set out to do for his state. This sets up a major battle in the Senate between Democrats and Republicans over his seat. And General Motors is recalling its autonomous cruise vehicles for a software update. The recall comes after one of the driverless cars dragged a person down the side of a road here in San Francisco last month. The victim was originally hit by another car and then thrown in front of the cruise car, causing it to try to pull over out of traffic instead of just staying stationary. A safety recall reports that Cruise's software played a large role in that crash. Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak was briefly hospitalized in Mexico City for a minor stroke. He was in Mexico attending a business forum. The 73-year-old was scheduled to speak but felt dizzy, experienced vertigo, and could not walk before going to the hospital. He has since been released. And a New York jury ruled actor Robert De Niro's production company is liable for gender discrimination and retaliation against his former personal assistant, ordering Canal Productions to pay her more than $1.2 million in damages. De Niro himself was found not liable. The man accused of attacking Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer went on trial today. Police say David DePape broke into the Pelosi's house in San Francisco last year while looking for the former speaker. He was allegedly trying to kidnap her. Body cam footage shown in court today shows the moment DePape hit Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer. He has pleaded not guilty to attempted kidnapping of a federal official and assault on the family member of a federal official. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins me now. Steve, bring us up to speed on what happened today.
Yeah, this was a day of opening statements, packed courtroom, DePape sitting in the front row, obviously wearing a sweater, clean shaven, and listening intently to what I would call something of a legal gambit by his defense team, his public defenders, sort of leaning into the fact that this was a guy with extreme political leanings, that he's admitting to what he did at that Pelosi home on tape, that it's caught on that body cam video that we've all seen 100 times. So the defense team knows that they have to sort of come up with a different strategy if the plea is not guilty. And so they did. Very interesting to hear, first of all, the prosecution sort of listing off what you would expect, that they have the tape, that he's admitted to this, that they will show and prove through evidence, both audio, video, and otherwise, and through witnesses, that this guy was guilty. The defense sort of leaning into a separate strategy of admitting to the fact that he committed a violent crime, admitting to the fact that he had these extreme political right-wing leanings, that he was a conspiracy theorist, that he was attempting to ostensibly, if not kidnap Nancy Pelosi, then to sit her in a room and have a real conversation with her. And in saying that, sort of dispute the charges. That is what they were going after. It is the spirit of those two charges that you listed, which sort of implies that he was doing what he did to impede a public official from doing her work as a public official. Their argument instead is that he was doing it because he was so radicalized by these conspiracy theories. Will it work? We shall see. There is about a week left of trial. We heard from witnesses already today, including some of the responding officers who recorded that video camera, and also part of the testimony of him admitting to all of this, essentially through an interview as well. So what played out today was interesting, fascinating even, but we're not sure if it'll work at this point yet. Jake?
Well, so you mentioned here, Steve, the idea that the defense is somehow relying on the idea that DePape was pulled down these rabbit holes, these conspiracy theories. And I'm wondering what you think the prosecution will make of that. Will they be trying to demonstrate some sort of, extra consequences for those who fall into political misinformation and into conspiracy theories in this coming election season?
I think they've been building that case since this trial started. I think they've been building that case even before in the evidentiary hearings, pointing specifically to the radicalization that he experienced online. Obviously, this was a man with a troubled past. We had heard from family that he had fallen sort of into drugs and his life was in disrepair. And as we hear of people that are radicalized often, this is the case, but also that there should be special appropriate consequences for this sort of political violence, that this was more than just a guy that was breaking into a house for money or for drugs. This was a statement. It was a statement aimed at one of the top public officials in the country. And not only that, he wasn't just targeting Pelosi. There was a litany list, a hit list of other people that he was targeting as well, from Adam Schiff to Gavin Newsom to Tom Hanks. Anybody that he felt like was in his sort of political crosshairs was also part of this larger plan that he had that, of course, fell apart when he was in that Nancy Pelosi's home. Jake.
So interesting to know just whether or not he's going to wind up, concocting a defense out of having fallen into all of that, or whether that's somehow going to deepen the stakes against him. That is really interesting, Steve. And what about the victim himself? Do we think we will hear from Paul Pelosi?
Paul Pelosi expected to testify maybe as early as Monday of next week. Of course, again, we've heard from some of the responding officers. We've heard from a CSI expert as well. But that Pelosi testimony expected to really be fireworks in court when he gets up on the stand to talk about what happened. Jake.
Steve Patterson for us outside the courthouse. Steve, thank you. Coming up, surgeons were able to perform the very first transplant of an entire human eye. We have those extraordinary details, but first, you got to see this. Cue the holiday music, because the Rockefeller Christmas tree was just cut down today in Vestdal, New York. The 80-year-old Norway spruce is 80 feet tall, and it's expected to arrive in New York City this Saturday. And here's the thing. It's going to be decorated with 50,000 lights on 5 miles of wire. This tree lighting show will happen on Wednesday, November 29th. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening here out west that we are following tonight. A fight erupted outside the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles last night, where a group of people were inside watching a film compiled of footage from the day Hamas attacked southern Israel. According to the LA Times, shouting matches between both pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian protesters turned violent. At least one person was detained after authorities dispersed the crowd. Some 8,500 Kaiser Permanente workers have agreed to a new contract. The 4-year deal comes with pay raises for employees in 7 states and Washington, D.C. We're talking $25 an hour in California for minimum wage workers and $23 an hour in other states. Kaiser and the union reached an agreement last month after thousands of members took part in a 3-day strike. And California is drought-free for the first time in more than 3 years. It's all because of the incredibly wet and snowy winter we had here this year, which has left local reservoirs sitting at 125% of their average levels. The question now becomes, how long will it last? Now, remember how long it took for a candidate to be declared the winner in the 2020 presidential election? No? Well, let me help jog your memory. Joe Biden was not declared president until 4 days after the election. One of the states that took longest to count ballots was Arizona, and NBC's Noah Pransky has more on what they are trying to do to change for faster results.
It was a long election month in Arizona 2020.
Our call on Arizona is too early to call.
The crowd continues to grow.
You could be in recount territory in Arizona.
We don't feel safe in our work because of the harassment and threats that are based in lies.
And for the officials like Stephen Richer at the center of it all, there hasn't been much sleep in the 3 years since.
I am a Diet Coke addict. I am a living, walking experiment. And I probably drink, north of 100 ounces every single day.
All right, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so election week, you're pounding 50 to 60 Diet Cokes.
Yeah.
Fueled by a youthful exuberance for due process and lots of caffeine, Richer may be the most important election official in the country's most important swing state.
This is our ballot tabulation room.
The brain center.
If you will, the brain center.
Elected county recorder in 2020 in Maricopa County, by far Arizona's largest, Richer's official job is to conduct elections. But unofficially, it's to preserve trust in them.
We have these cameras. We hope that they inspire confidence. We hope that they give people an insight into the process.
Because since the day he took office in January 2021, This old-school Republican has spent every waking, caffeinated hour swatting down some of the most outlandish conspiracy theories one could possibly dream of, and working to prevent the next ones.
Lots of new cages. It's not connected to the internet, that it's not connected to anything external, since the USB ports are not accessible there. More and more cameras every single year.
In many ways, Arizona is this perfect storm for election chaos. Like most Western states, almost all of its voters choose to cast ballots by mail. A huge number of them don't return those ballots until Election Day, and officials, by law, are not even permitted to touch the ballots until after polls close. Add in remarkably narrow election margins in this notoriously purple swing state, and you get elections that are predictably too close to predict within the first couple of days. Seeing the distrust that breeds, Richard's calling for change.
I would just like to sort of reconfigure the system such that we're able to have a higher percentage within the first 24 hours.
Because you think it'll pay dividends in terms of confidence?
Correct.
He outlined a series of proposals earlier this year that he says will produce faster election results in Arizona and beyond. They range from what some would say are common sense, like changing state laws so election officials can process mail ballots as soon as they're received, to controversial, like ending the popular option of dropping your mail ballot off in person on Election Day.
I would say that you have to have your early ballots back to us by Saturday before Election Day Tuesday. That would allow us to have a much higher percentage of results immediately available at 8 p.m. on election night.
Richer has also floated spending less time trying to determine intent on ballots where the voters make innocent mistakes, like filling in multiple ovals or leaving a coffee stain. He admits these changes could disqualify tens of thousands of votes in a presidential year.
My real goal here is let's at least have a conversation.
A conversation about what sacrifices are worth it for faster results. Or if it would just be better to slow the rest of the country down to Arizona's speed.
I've even floated an idea of a moratorium that nobody releases results until, maybe 5 days after Election Day, because a lot of states have a lot of different policies.
Were your proposals intentionally provocative as a way to educate the public about how your office works?
I am flattered if you think ballot adjudication changes is a provocative, saucy topic. They were meant to illustrate some of the things that go on.
So even though his proposals went nowhere this year in the Arizona legislature, making it very likely the 2024 election will also take days to sort out, at least more of his constituents will know why.
So have we won? I am not ready to stand on an aircraft carrier and have mission accomplished behind me, but we're working really hard on the mission still.
Noah Pransky, NBC News.
5 Republican presidential candidates met on stage in Miami last night, and guess what? It was not very peaceful. At times, it turned out to be a pretty fiery debate.
We need leadership, and we need it now. I'm sick of Republicans losing. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. There's a cancer in the Republican establishment.
I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country. I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
They're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
What was the point of all of this arguing? I mean, it was the third Republican primary debate. It was also the third time former President Donald Trump and GOP frontrunner chose to do something else with his time instead. This time he held a competing rally down the road in Hialeah. NBC's Dasha Burns has more.
Yeah, Jake, it was a fiery debate stage, but credit to the moderators, our colleagues, of course, they kept the trains on the tracks, and it was a smaller debate stage, just 5 people, so there was more time to get into the substance, of which there was quite a lot. We saw differences between these candidates on issues like foreign policy, both in terms of substance and aptitude. We also got into the issue of abortion, which, of course, is proving to be a challenge for Republicans, and things did get personal, especially between Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. Nikki Haley had perhaps her biggest applause lines of the night in her response to attacks from Ramaswamy. He acted a bit of like a foil to her, if you will. Take a listen.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching
out
to
of your
anybody else, your
voice.
adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
Over the last 3 debates, Ramaswamy's presence on the debate stage has actually opened opportunities for Nikki Haley, his attacks perhaps helping her more than hurting her. The two that are neck and neck right now, Haley and DeSantis, their exchanges weren't as fiery, but they did get into some arguments over issues on China, on energy policy, and we're really going to see those two duking it out now as they're both claiming big wins from last night. They both had opportunities to tout their executive leadership as governors, and they are neck and neck in the critical state of Iowa right now. DeSantis is going to be campaigning with Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, who was perhaps the biggest endorsement of the primary. Nikki Haley, though, has been really surging in the polls. Consolidation has to happen here, Jake. If there's any chance for anyone to really take on former President Trump, it's going to have to come down to a two-person race. So you're going to see a lot of back and forth, I'd imagine, between Haley and DeSantis in the coming weeks. Jake?
Dasha Burns on the fight in Florida. Dasha, thank you. California is bracing for what's called an atmospheric river, a system expected to bring heavy rain here for several days next week. The phenomenon is different from a typical rainstorm. Atmospheric rivers are miles-long bands of water vapor that bring extreme rainfall. They're pretty incredible. They can also bring snow and flooding as they move. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with what to expect from this system. Michelle?
Hey, Jake, great to see you. Yes, we are looking at a lot of rain. We could see some higher elevation snow setting up next week. Now, that's not just next week. We've had an atmospheric river in place over the last couple of weeks. We had a really soggy weekend last week in the Pacific Northwest. We're looking at the rain falling right now. In fact, this is radar. We're looking at some really heavy rain in spots. That's where you see those darker colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. We're also looking at blue. That's higher elevation snow. So we're going to be measuring some snow in feet over the next several days. This is just one system that's coming through this weekend. The next system is going to be a little bit larger. So as we go throughout tomorrow, we're looking at that next storm moving onshore. It's taking aim at the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be confined to the coastal portions of Oregon into Washington. Heavy rain, some wind, and also some snow. Then as we go throughout Saturday, we'll see this coastal system moving a little bit further inland. And keep in mind, this is just a series of storms that keep moving in with this atmospheric river. So that system's going to push in. It's going to bring some rain, some mountain snow, and some really tricky travel for your Saturday in these areas. We're looking at slick travel on parts of I-90, also I-84. Notice all this snow in the higher elevation, so you need to be careful in those spots. Rainfall forecast could see quite a bit in some spots. Again, where you see those darker colors, we're looking over 4 inches in some spots. And also looking at a lot of heavy snow, too. We're going to be measuring snow in feet in some spots, and that's where you see those brighter colors, the pinks and also the purples. So that's over the next couple of days, another soggy weekend there. And then as we get towards next week, this is the atmospheric river that has high confidence of being a pretty significant storm Monday through Wednesday. And this could last into Friday as well. So what is an atmospheric river? Well, it's really a river in the sky. It's a band of water vapor. So it's a plume of moisture. It could be thousands of miles long, could be hundreds of miles wide. And it brings a lot of heavy rain. It brings mountain snow, and it brings significant rainfall in many spots along the West Coast. And that's what we've been seeing. So what really happens here, I kind of think of it as a sponge in the sky. It's sailing through, it hits the land, it gets squeezed out, and that's where we get those really high rainfall rates and those really high snowfall rates as well. And that's what we're looking at as we head towards Monday into Friday. This is going to be a storm that we're going to be talking about for several days. And it's not just the Pacific Northwest like we've seen over the past couple of days. Now we're talking to Southern California, places that don't normally see a whole lot of rain. So we're looking at 2, 3, 4, even 5 inches of rain in some spots with those darker colors. San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, you could see quite a bit of rain in some spots. Los Angeles, San Diego, probably closer to an inch, but some spots in Los Angeles you could see, or in and around Los Angeles, you could see up to 2 inches, and then higher as you go to the Northern California. And also the big cities, the higher elevation ski cities, we could see some higher elevation snow as well. Could see over 2 feet of snow in some spots. The silver lining, this is good news. We had a severe drought just a year ago. We had a moderate, 100% of California was in a moderate drought, 92 in a severe drought. And this is where you see those darker colors, extreme, exceptional. But look what's happening now. Now that we had all this rain, this atmospheric river, we are drought-free, which is really good news. 0% for moderate, severe, extreme, exceptional. We're looking good all throughout the state of California. That's really good news for the wildfires because now the wet season is starting, and we are starting with this storm next week, feeling like a February storm. So taking a look at some of these numbers, it was very wet and snowy to 2023 from California to the Rockies. Historic winter with the snowfall, also rainfall, and also Tropical Storm Hillary really helped to kind of take down those numbers, those drought numbers. So we're looking really good, Jake, and that's good news. But this will be a storm that we're going to be watching over the next several days next week. Back to you.
We will take it, Michelle. Thank you so much. A veteran from Arkansas is making history as the first recipient of an eye transplant. Aaron James was seriously hurt after his face came in contact with live electrical wires. He lost his left eye, his nose, and his lips. These pictures show the before and after of the accident and then the surgery. It's the first of its kind medical procedure, and it was performed by a team of 140 surgeons at a New York City hospital. James is now the first person to ever receive a full eye transplant. Though he cannot see out of the transplanted eye yet, James considers the surgery a success.
I never expected it to work at all. And they told me that from the beginning. Look, I can't see, which I didn't have an eye there to begin with, after the accident. Maybe at least, y'all can learn something to help the next person.
NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal joins me now. Dr. Syal, thanks so much for being here. I mean, explain how much of this is science and how much of it is magic when it comes to something like an eye transplant. I mean, right, we just don't know all that much about how the eye connects to the brain. How is it that they're able to transplant one?
Yeah, good evening, Jake. I like to think that, Professor Dumbledore had a hand in this, but really it's an incredible, impressive feat that's performed here at NYU here in New York. This is the first time that an eye has ever been transplanted. And, Jake, they also did a half partial face transplant. Only less than 50 of those have been done in the last decade or so. So really incredible accomplishment here. And, Jake, I know you mentioned that he can't actually see out of that eye, but it's important for people to understand, despite that, how much this patient's quality of life has improved. He tells us that just walking across the street, he looks like a normal person again. People aren't staring at him, wondering what happened to him. And so just that alone, you really see improving his quality of life. And we're hopeful that he can regain more and more vision, hopefully, as the time goes on.
And I guess that is my question. I don't in any way want to knock down the miracle that this procedure represents, but I mean, is there the chance over time that the eye will take, as it were, and that vision will actually come back to him over time?
We're hopeful. So, Jake, they did transplant the eye, and they were able to successfully get blood flow to the back of the eye. There is some signs that it's actually, light is registering with the eye. But, Jake, they did inject stem cells here into the back in hopes that those stem cells can actually help the neurons grow those connections. Because, as you said, it's an incredibly complex connection system here, Jake, the eyes and the brain. It's something that we, quite frankly, don't really understand to the full degree. So we're hopeful that with those stem cell injections, he can start to get some of those neurons to connect with each other in the eye and the brain, and hopefully get some sense of vision back in his eye.
So if this is a success and he does begin to gain vision back, I mean, between that and the facial transplant, as you say, fewer than 50 of those procedures have taken place. I mean, what's sort of on the horizon? When you look at this, what do you think of as coming next that makes you excited about the era that we live in?
Regenerative medicine, Jake. I think that's what makes this so exciting is that you're taking the eye and you're putting it into somebody else, and you're having that eye that you put in sort of connect with a different brain. And I think if we can somehow figure that out, maybe with the help of those stem cell injections, there's a whole host of things that we can try. I mean, the nervous system historically is incredibly hard to regenerate, which is why when patients have diving accidents or spinal cord injuries, you don't actually see them recover that much. And so if we can somehow figure this out, I think it does say a lot about the future of regenerative medicine going forward, Jake.
Dr. Akshay Syal with an amazing milepost on the journey toward true regenerative medicine. That is very, very cool. Thanks for being here.
Anytime.
Up next, some of the biggest stories trending around the world. We have told you about orcas harassing boats. Well, they're doing it again, and this time they sank a yacht. Those details are next. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. In South Korea, a robot crushed a worker to death at a vegetable packaging plant. It happened earlier this week. Police say the robot's arms grabbed the man and pressed him against a conveyor belt. Investigators say early evidence suggests human error was to blame. A pod of orcas attacked and eventually sank a yacht in the Strait of Gibraltar. The crew was rescued and no one on board was hurt. According to a recent study, since 2022, there have been about 500 encounters between orcas and boats. That's the thing that I think about when I can't sleep at night. Ukraine says Russia is responsible for a missile attack that struck a civilian ship in the Black Sea. The attack killed one person and hurt 4 others. Ukrainian officials say yesterday's attack marks the 21st time Russia has attacked the port's infrastructure since pulling out of the Black Sea grain deal. And President Emmanuel Macron hosted a Gaza aid conference in France today. Officials from Western and Arab nations and the UN came together to talk about providing urgent aid to people in the Gaza Strip. Macron reiterated calls for a humanitarian pause in Israel's operations and stressed that civilians must be protected. There are new warnings today from the head of the NTSB and the Air Traffic Controllers Union. That's after a series of plane close calls have occurred both on the runway and in the air. In fact, there have been so many near misses recently that the total number has hit a 10-year high, and officials are afraid the next one could be a disaster. NBC's Tom Costello reports.
From a recent mid-air collision involving 2 business jets after a pilot took off without clearance,
airport is shut down at this time.
To Austin,
FedEx is on the go,
where a controller cleared a FedEx plane to land just as a Southwest flight was departing.
Words fail to adequately describe how close 131 souls came to dying that day.
To Boston, where a corporate jet crossed in front of a landing JetBlue flight. It's been a year of close calls, 23 runway near misses, more in the air. While just 1.3% of all flights, the NTSB chief warns the risk is growing.
Our safety system is showing clear signs of strain that we cannot ignore.
The biggest contributing factors, fatigue and distractions in cockpits and control towers. 77% of them understaffed, leading to mandatory 6-day weeks and 10-hour days for controllers. While it'll take years to hire and train enough controllers, the CEO of Delta Airlines said on the Today Show this morning the turnover is impacting safety.
The air traffic controllers have had some new folks, so I think it warrants the continued review of our safety management.
Are you concerned about the impact of that on safety of the airspace?
Absolutely, I am worried about safety.
Tonight, Congress under pressure from all sides to spend the money for urgent safety upgrades.
Before we go, it's time for the future of everything. AI can be used for all sorts of amazing things, but California is using the tech to fight fires, even detecting them long before 911 calls are even made. We'll explain. Stay tuned. Here in California, experts say it has been a mild wildfire season, and a lot of that has to do with all of the rain we got here this year. But if history is indication, that is not a trend we can probably count on. And now, cutting-edge technology is being used to fight future wildfires faster and smarter. A new pilot program uses AI to monitor live camera feeds all over the state to detect smoke and flames before 911 calls are even made. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz shows us how it works.
Paradise is gone. It's been 5 years since the deadliest wildfire in California history, the Camp Fire. The fire took everything. It began as just a spark in the small town of Paradise, but soon exploded, trapping residents as flames engulfed entire homes and neighborhoods.
There are embers blowing under my car.
It's a devastation California has been spending the years since working to prevent.
This is where we get to see the magic of AI.
Now, inside this operations center at CAL FIRE's Southern California headquarters, revolutionary AI technology is being used to spot fires and then stop them before they can spread too far. CAL FIRE's Staff Chief of Intelligence, Philip Selig, showed us how it works.
As soon as that smoke is visible within that camera frame, and we get that notification to dispatch resources.
The AI has been trained to scan a network of more than 1,000 cameras set up in fire-prone areas across the state and alert CAL FIRE of any potential smoke.
Yes, this is smoke. This is not smoke. So going through all of that data, it took a little while.
One of the coolest things about this technology is that it can spot smoke that's
pretty much impossible to see with the human eye. Like here, it's indicating there's smoke, but we can't see it.
2 of the cameras using this AI are located here, high up in the Palomar Mountain in East San Diego.
The cameras like the ones up here are scanning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can see out some 70 miles. CAL FIRE says already there's been several times that the AI has been able to spot a fire and alert them before they've gotten any 911 calls.
We've had a success, a fire starting in the middle of the night. No one called 911. We got resources there. We put it out, and we still never received one 911 call. So who knows how big that fire would have gotten.
But that doesn't mean this technology is a replacement for real people. For more than 100 years, watchtowers here at Booker Hill have been used as a fire lookout.
Cuyamaca Peak is actually covered now, too.
Yeah.
This one still is today. Volunteers Ron and Ernie spend hours monitoring for signs of smoke.
What do you guys make of that? What do you make of AI now supplementing your job?
It's another tool. I don't think you're ever going to replace, at least not for a while, the human factor.
Like all technology, it isn't perfect, but in the 3 months since the AI has been implemented statewide, CAL FIRE says it's been invaluable.
How significant is this?
It's huge. This is very significant. It could be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It could be 1 o'clock in the morning. This system doesn't go to sleep. It's persistent.
Last month, Time magazine named the technology one of its 2023 Inventions of the Year, honoring CAL FIRE and their partners at UC San Diego and Alert California. The hope is the AI will be used beyond California to places like Maui, still recovering from the deadliest wildfire in modern U.S. history.
We've spoken with people in Australia, we've spoken with people in Hawaii to help teach them more about what a network of cameras like ours can do.
There's no way of knowing exactly how many megafires this AI may help prevent, but CAL FIRE says stopping just one is a huge success.
It seems here like this technology could really be saving lives.
Sure, absolutely. Those fires that you never hear about, you never read about, you don't see on TV, they're not on the headlines, they're not the campfire. That's the value of this system, because it could have prevented a fire like that.
NBC correspondent Liz Kreutz joins us now. Liz, very cool story. Thank you for this. I mean, obviously, this is still in its early stages, but do we think that Ron and Ernie are no longer going to be needed eventually? I mean, you know, can the artificial intelligence really do the job of human lookouts?
Yeah, I mean, they say the technology is not perfect yet, Jake. For instance, it might see something, some dust, and maybe think it's smoke, although that's part of what they're training it not to do. But CAL FIRE truly says that this has been very successful for them in just the few months that they've started using it. In fact, a chief told me tonight that just in the month of October, there were 40 times where the AI technology alerted CAL FIRE of smoke prior to any 911 calls being logged into their dispatch center. So some really promising technology here, Jake.
Very promising. Liz Kreutz for us tonight. Thank you, Liz. And finally, for tonight's Best of Us, a life-saving moment. A Florida man was meeting his grandson for the first time when he went into cardiac arrest at a restaurant. Thankfully, sitting next to him was a table full of doctors who rushed to his rescue. NBC's Rahima Hellis has their story.
Eddie Montero was having dinner with his family in Central Florida, on a trip visiting his daughters and meeting his grandson for the first time when his life flashed before his eyes. He says they were out to dinner when he felt dizzy and collapsed. Montero had gone into cardiac arrest, an event that the NIH says is fatal 9 times out of 10 when it happens outside of a hospital. But by a twist of fate, this time it was not fatal, because sitting next to him was a group of doctors who immediately sprung into action.
We quickly checked a pulse, and as soon as there was identification that he had no pulse and he was in cardiac arrest, CPR was immediately initiated.
Dr. Nicole Brenner, who also happens to be 35 weeks pregnant, and 3 residents turning that dining room into an emergency room until paramedics arrived.
Dr. Sadomer called for emergency assistance, helped identify if there was any additional support in the area. Both Dr. Alicia and Dr. Rivera were able to initiate CPR and take over for me because a little bit of a challenge.
Eso es lo que nosotros le agradecemos muchísimo a Dios.
Montero's daughter says she's thankful the doctors were there because they saved her father's life.
Eran unos ángeles.
que se me aparecieron.
Forever grateful for those doctors who stepped in and stepped up.
Yo volví a vivir, ¿ves? Volví a vivir, ¿me entiendes?
An incredible story of being in the right place at the right time. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
Doctors, nurses, firefighters, they should all be allowed to board the plane first. Rahima Ellis, thank you so much for that. Now, that will do it for us tonight. It's been an extreme pleasure to be with you. I'm Jake Ward. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.